Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Mort, and it is Tuesday, about 6:20 a.m., and it's a glorious, sunny, cool day here in the middle of nowhere, Washington State. Hopefully, everybody's having a good day. Learnings article came out yesterday. It was a pretty tame learnings article, I think, as far as things are concerned. It's interesting because I think we're getting to the point in TFT where there aren't a ton of like major learnings every set. We kind of understand how things work. Sometimes it's things behind the scenes development wise. Sometimes it's, choices made by a newer designer. But overall, we kind of know like how sets play out. And set 14 kind of played out exactly as we expected, for better or worse. So, but I still stand by what I say that like we don't ship below B tier sets anymore. We know how to make at least solid, good B tier TFT. No problem. The challenge is making greater than B tier. That's always going to be the big challenge in TFT. So, yeah. Okay, let's talk about questions. All right, first thing on the list, by the way, quick update on Sephiroth. My wife bought this like cat cabinet. I posted a picture uh, on Discord, but basically in my daughter's room now, there's this cat cabinet. It has a litter box and food and everything, and so Sephiroth can now hang out in my daughter's room and is out of the garage, so we can put our cars back in the garage, which will be nice. But yeah, we still can't let the cats interact with each other. So now we have 4 cats who can't go in Leota's room and 1 cat who can't leave her room. But, at least he's out of the garage. He also got a nice little collar, so he feels like an indoor cat. He is so talkative, though. So he's getting love and at least has someone to sleep with now. So, yeah, Sephiroth's doing okay. And like I said, hopefully we'll get him tested in another month or so. So, yeah, there's your update on Sephiroth. Oh yeah, and we recorded the Set 15 PBE rundown yesterday. Sloan and I recorded that. That's all ready to go. Should be released either Sunday or Monday. It's about an hour and 10 minutes. So we got through it pretty quick. But a lot of good stuff here. A lot of stuff I'm excited to talk about. I'm sure we'll get questions about some of it, which is good. It'll be fun. So, all right. Now time for the actual questions. All right. Flex versus traits, full greed, and the balance around it. So this was a pretty long question someone had written. But generally it became about how are people supposed to flex if all of the power is in the traits, right? The verticals, versus if they split things up and all that jazz. And, if you're full greeding, how does that all work? So this is a tricky one, and it is probably one of the hardest parts about balancing TFT. And I'm going to use boombots as an example, right? Because when balancing the power of a trait versus the power of the champions, it always comes down to a very simple formula, right? Which is, let's say you're playing Boombot, right? You're playing Urgot and Cho'Gath and, Fiddlesticks and Kog'Maw and Skarner and an Emblem, right? That's your 6 Boombot comp. Very strong, does a lot of damage. Okay. So the question is, what is the power that you lose by taking out 6 Boombot in order to replace, let's say, Kog'Maw and Skarner with Garen and Zac, right? That is essentially the math problem that needs to be true one way or the other. And what happens is, if the vertical is not intuitive to play, what happens is players are like, hey, I played this trait, I powered up this trait to its maximum value, and then it made my comp worse. That's weird. That makes no sense. And in addition, the more you do that, the more that essentially just getting to fast 8, fast 9 becomes more powerful, because obviously from the champion power wise, you can't have a 1 cost be more powerful than a 5 cost, right? Like, these are just obvious statements. You can't have a 3 cost be more powerful than a 5 cost. You're going to need those, those traits. So, or those champions high cost. So, where does that math lie? And we have seen countless times throughout TFT's history where if that math doesn't quite add up, you don't play the vertical trait. One of the most famous examples of this was 5 fairy versus 7 fairy, right? In set 12, you never played 7 fairy because having those last 2 champions and that trait not being powerful enough wasn't worth, the loss of not playing those 5 cost champions, right? And that number, that balance is always an incredibly thin line, right? If you took 6 Boombot right now and you nerfed it, I don't know, let's say 5%, the answer might be never play 6 Boombot. It might be play 4 Boombot, right? Because the ability to take out Skarner and Kog'Maw, who are essentially dead bodies for Zac and Garen, would go up significantly. And that's always the challenge, is that no matter what, and think of it in numerical terms, right? If 6 Boombot is 100 power, and 4 Boombot with Zac and Garen is 99.9 power, someone will tell you that you always need to play the vertical. Likewise, vice versa, players will say you always play it this way, right? Like, it always gets essentially solved, and I say solved in quotations because whether or not that's actually true is obviously dependent on your case and dependent on what resources you have. But, our job is to get that balance as close as possible, but we still have to err on the side of the intuitive thing, which is playing lots of the champions is a good thing, the vertical. If verticals aren't worth playing, why do they exist, right? And, other ways to make this more true is like you put a ton of power in the small things, right? And we've done this to some extent, right? Like playing 2 Bastion in your comp is a very big spike, right? Because it gives you your whole team that 10 armor and MR. That's valuable. Whereas going from 2 Bastion to 4 Bastion, makes those Bastions a little tankier, but it's not that big a spike. Same is true of Bruisers, things like that. Like, we have these classes that you can play a little of. Divinicore does this to some extent as well. But this is the challenge of the balance and the trade-offs, is that we don't want every endgame board to just be play a bunch of 4 and 5 costs with as many 2 pieces as you can shove in. That's not correct. But we do want those to be somewhat viable. And that's the balance, right? So, and it's interesting, if you look at the meta right now, most of the time, is it really verticals? Not really. Syndicate's actually a good example of this. Who's playing 5 Syndicate right now? Kind of no one, right? Like, it's 3 Syndicate, 4 Dynamo, and then a bunch of, flex traits. But the funny thing there is, are they really even flex, right? Like, the definition of flex is one of those things I think the TFT community has really struggled with over the years. Because, like, if you look at the Misfortune comp, is it really flex? No, it's predefined. You play MF Braum Darius, Gragas for Bruiser, Leona for Vanguard, 4 Dynamo. It's a predefined comp. The only thing flex about it is it's not really a vertical. So, the only way to really capture true flex that I think when people use that word really want in their mind would be make a bunch of champions that are identical, so it doesn't really matter which one you swap in between. Or the alternative, which is make a bunch of traits that are so bad that you don't need to run them. I think that's what early TFT did. There were some traits that were so bad, you may as well not have participated in them. I think one of the best examples of this was Set 4 Hunter. Set 4 Hunter was definitely worth running 2, but anything more than 2? Nah, completely terrible. I mean, even Rapid Fire on live was close to this for a while before we kept cranking 4 and 6. But for the most part, you would just run 2 Rapid Fire. So there's no magic solve here, unfortunately. And again, the more power that's in the champions, the more fast 8 and 9 become viable. The more power that's in the traits, the more people complain that it's just play the verticals, buy all the Star Guardians, you know. But yeah, it's definitely a tricky thing. Our goal is to make sure that there are at least a lot of different options, right? And this is where I really like the Dynamo comp, because at least with the Dynamo comp for a while, it was like you can itemize Morgana, you can itemize Elise. Hell, you could even itemize Jhin and play a little bit of Dynamo in the early game. And you could flex early game pretty hard, but the end result was you were always working towards these sort of predefined TFT Academy comps, because frankly, that's just how most of people process our game. Is they're like, my goal is to reach these end game comps that someone else looked up and told me are optional or optimal. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's any big changes we can make to really solve this. If there was, I'd be interested in hearing an idea on how to solve that. But I think we've tried every permutation. I think where we're at right now is kind of the best we're going to get with what TFT is. So, at least until some innovations, hint, hint. So, yeah, there you go. All right, expectations for set 15. Are you excited for it? So this is one of those questions where, like, no matter what I say, there are going to be people out there that believe me or don't believe me, right? Because, like, let's say I was like, nah, set 15's mid. Holy cow, what a dick thing to say, right? Like, could you imagine if I was just like, yeah, that set team's kind of stinking it up. They're not doing a great job. That would be a terrible thing to say. So you almost by default have to say set 15 is going to be amazing, or at least good. But then I'm just a shill, right? Then you're just a riot shill. Of course you think the set's going to be good. The other thing is that what defines good, right? Like, and I love set 10 for this, because if you ask some of those very loud challenger players, set 10 was garbage. You know, it had Chosen, and the balance wasn't that great, and there were other things that were rough. And assassins killed your backline. That wasn't very fun. But you ask the majority of players, and set 10 was amazing, and everyone begged for it back constantly, and it's like the best set we've ever made in, you know, the last 2 years, and is S tier. So really, what defines good, you know? That's going to be different for everyone else. So here's what I'll tell you. Honest to God, and again, you can take it or leave it. I think the thematics for this set are really, really good. Blue Velvet talked about it on my stream, but I think the cinematic they did for it is amazing. I think a lot of the things in the set are extremely charming, and I think that's going to appeal to a lot of people. I think that's great. I have to be vague. I can't spoil much more than what's already been said, but I think there's good things there. And then the other thing is, I am excited for some of the mechanical changes that have been a long time coming that are coming in the set. And I'm excited for what they do and what they open up for the future of TFT, because there's one thing in the PvE rundown that we talk about that is a big system change that is permanent in TFT. And I am very glad it's finally happening. And I think it'll do really good things, and I'm very excited for that. Those are the two biggest things I personally am excited for. There are other things that are good, so don't look at that as there's only two things Mort likes. No. I will also say there's one trait in particular that I think is just us getting really, really creative in a good way. But it's also the kind of trait that, like, I could totally see a challenger player just being like, it's just a day, you know? So, but like I said, two things I think are going to be very successful are the thematics and that one system change. So I'm excited for those. So, do I think it's going to be the best set of all time? Nah, I don't think so. I don't think so personally, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. To be honest, actually, here, let me be blunt. If I was wrong and players perceived it to be the best set ever, that would be such a good learning. There'd be some very interesting takeaways if that became true. Yeah. Okay, so now if it somehow became the best set ever, that would be really interesting. That would tell us a lot. Especially on the set mechanic side, that would tell us a lot. It is possible. It's definitely possible. So, it's definitely not where I would bet my money, but it's possible. And it would be really interesting to learn if it did. There'd be some key learnings there. So, anyway, that's it. That's all I can say without really spoiling much more. That being said, we're not waiting much longer. This weekend, you'll get to see bits and pieces. By Sunday, we'll be talking about all the details. And then a week from today, you'll be playing it on PBE. So, that'd be pretty cool. There you go. All right. How do you feel about the meta going into the Tactician crown? And the person who posted this was talking about how the meta for them turned into a lot of Cypher and a lot of Fast 9 greed into Urgot. And those were kind of the big things, and there wasn't much else. So, how I feel about the meta is that if you only look at the first place comps, I don't actually think it's going to be that great of a meta. It won't be that diverse. There will be one or two people in the position. Okay, actually, the way I would phrase this is there will be 3 or 4 people that try to hit the known highest cap comp. 2 or 3 of them will fail miserably and go 7th and 8th. One of them will succeed and go 1st. And then Twitch chat will go, oh, Urgot wins again. And I think that's not the best, for sure. But I think what's actually going to be really interesting when you break it down is the people who spot recognize different positions and sort of go, hey, this is a game where if I play really well, I can guarantee myself a 3rd or a 2nd. I think that's going to be like everything below the Urgot and Cypher board is actually really, really interesting and diverse. And I think with the tempo that some of these lobbies will have, there's going to be a lot of people who get punished for trying to go that line. And you're going to see some score lines where people go like 8-7-1, 7-8 because they tried to do it too much or from the wrong spots where they weren't supposed to. And I think that's going to be interesting. And it will remind me, honestly, of Set 13's championship, where I think a lot of people had, their A-tier comps and even some S-tier comps. But what ended up winning the championship was a middling B-tier comp of Zeri that most people had essentially counted out because, again, spot recognition was the important thing. And Dishope recognized his spot and recognized where he was at and made it work. And I think that's the thing that, at least last set, separated Dishope from a lot of these players. And even watching Robin scrim a little bit yesterday, I'll be honest, and a little shade to Robin, but also I could just be wrong. But it felt like a lot of Robin's spot recognition was pretty bad. He kept sort of going, well, I have to play this from this angle. He very much had that, I only play the known good comps. And, well, he had a Morgana with decent items. And he was like, I must play Vex from this spot, but I don't have tiers, so I'm screwed. And it was like, there are many other ways you could take this. But in his mind, it was like, no, I must play Vex. So I think that mentality is the kind of mentality that will block people from hitting that top 8. But we'll see. We'll see. But again, at the end of the day, which comps will get, if you're one of those people that literally just looks at the first place comps and uses that to judge the meta, it's not going to be the best meta, I think. I think we could have done better. I think one of the other things we did, and I approved this was before I left, so you can blame me for this one, is that I said, let's try to buff a bunch of the 4 costs a little bit on that last patch, so that if there's a meta going on at Worlds, at least it involves around more of the 4 and 5 cost space, which is generally more interesting than a reroll meta for these type of championships. And so that's where things like the Misfortune buff came through. So the hope is, at the very least, they're still entertaining games, because it's the journey on how you get there. The worst case of this would be every game 3 or 4 people are open forwarding. That would be bad. So, but if we do get 3 or 4 people open forwarding, I think that's more just a sign of how consistently you can get to 9. So we'll see. It'll be interesting. But what I'll also say is, no matter how it plays out, there will be someone at least saying that the meta was garbage. That's just a fact, you know. No matter how it plays out, someone will say it was bad. And that's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to watch the games, have fun, root people on, and see how it goes. So I definitely don't think it'll be set 9 levels of bad. That's for sure. So, all right. All right, I got one last question here. When I come back to the TFT team after 3 months, will it be in the same role, or will it be doing something else? That's the question. And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know. It actually really depends on how things go while I'm gone. I think, let's say, for example, best case scenario, I'm gone for 3 months. While I'm gone, TFT team crushes it. Everything goes well. And the balance is good. And set development's good. They get ahead of schedule on things. Everything's looking great. The team is a well-oiled, functioning machine. Cool. Then would I go back to the same role? Probably not. I think at that point, my boss would go, things are running great. We need you to do these other high-end design problems that a high-level designer should be solving. Go work on those. Because as the TFT team expands, there are definitely new opportunities. And one of the limiting factors of what I can contribute to has been that it felt like I needed to solve things like the balance and stuff like that. So if the team doesn't need me, that's great. And I can go do some other stuff on TFT that will be high impact. And that'd be good. I think my boss in particular would be very excited if that's the reality we end up in. But let's say it goes just okay to mid, like barely okay, right? Like, let's say that's where we end up. Then I think there's a version where I come back and I sort of take the people who are working in those spaces and go, hey, where are we struggling with? And I spend a good amount of time not necessarily taking back stuff, but also maybe training and filling in the gaps of like, where are they struggling? What can I do to help? How can I show you what you might have not been thinking of, and try to keep leveling up people to train them? It's like, okay, you know, maybe there were some struggles, but here's how we fix that. And here's how you move forward. And you got this, you know, and sort of be there as a support anchor, but not necessarily taking that role or anything like that. Then there's the third scenario, which is obviously the scenario we are not rooting for, which is things are on fire. Set development has fallen behind. Balance is pretty rough. That's where I think that I would probably end up having to come back to the same role, But I would also kind of get in trouble with my boss, who's sort of going like, bro, you can't be doing this. You need to figure out how to make sure that you're not a single point of failure. And so, if anything, that would, even though I'm not there, it would reflect very poorly on me that I didn't get the team prepared for me being gone. Because especially in the corporate world, training your replacement is a very common thing that is expected of you. So if I didn't do that, I would get in trouble. So that's what we're not rooting for. But in that world, I would probably have to go back to the same role and start to go, okay, how do we figure this out? Now, the thing I'll say, and this is something I've been having trouble convincing people is true, is when I say things like, well, the reason it's challenging to train people in this is because TFT is one of the hardest games out there to balance due to the multiple variables and the way they all interact with each other. And then when I say stuff like that, people are like, nah, you're just making your job sound hard. But that's the thing with human communication, right? It's like, if you say something is true, people will be like, well, what's the motivation for you saying that? Is that actually true, or are you just trying to make yourself look good? And so, yeah. But I don't know. TFT is a very difficult game to balance and design for. You have to keep a lot of variables in your head. I don't know. I struggle to see many other games that, in order to make it all work right, is quite as difficult. But part of that could also be, okay, I think to get TFT to like 85% good, it's actually not that hard. But to get it that final 15%, that's the hard part, right? I think all you have to do, no, I shouldn't say that. But, nah, I'm trying to say something, but it could be perceived as shade, and I don't really want to have anyone perceive it as shade, even though it's not meant to be shade. So I'm just going to leave it there. But anyway, point is, TFT, very difficult to balance. And yeah, so we'll see. I mean, keep in mind, it's been one day, right? Like, I've not been on the team for a whole day. I don't even think the team notices. And if they do notice it, it'll take like 3 weeks, right? Like, I think the first time anyone might even potentially notice I'm gone, really, other than just like it's quiet or there's no your face jokes, will be when set 15 hits PBE and how that's going. So, because that's usually one of those times where I pull a lot of my weight. But, fat joke. So yeah, we'll see. It's a long ways off. So there you go. That's all the questions I brought with me today. Let me make sure that's true. Did that one? Yep. So that's all I got for today. Yeah, I definitely it's a weird feeling. If anything I learned about myself on summer break is I need projects. I need goals. I'd get bored without goals. And the problem is, if I want to pick a goal, I need to ensure I have enough time for the goal. So, like, dumb example, but let's say I wanted to like make my own card game. Well, a 1 week break isn't going to be enough time to make my own card game, so I don't start that goal. Yeah, I need things to do. Otherwise I get bored and then I doom scroll, and doom scrolling's terrible. So, but thankfully I found a few things to do, and yeah. So, but today is another quiet day at work. At least I have one thing I can like start to really deeply think about. So, yeah. I don't know. Oh, one last thing I saw. There was I saw literally as I was getting ready today, there was a Reddit post that says, "Is TFT dying? I had to wait in queue for 5 minutes." And I just want to answer this one really quick. No, TFT is not dying. The reason you had to wait 5 minutes in queue is because you were playing ranked, and a lot of the people who are playing ranked have hit their ranked cap and have moved on because it's the end of the set. And the people who are still playing TFT are playing things like Pengu's Party, Set 10, and stuff like that. So ranked queues are a little slower right now. This is normal. This happens every set. Our numbers are fine. And guess what? In a week, it'll be even slower because everyone will be on PvE or playing Pengu's Party. So that's just how it goes at the end of a set. That's pretty normal. No TFT is not dying. If anything, quite the opposite. So there you go. All right, we're at 30 minutes. I'm at the uphill part. Hopefully you guys have a great day. Happy Tuesday. I will see you in 3 days for the World's Co-Stream. Have a good day. That's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.